Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Baird Footwear, Sydney. My name is Maggie Kelly and I am the Men's Marketing Manager here at Baird, and I'm also going to be your host for this evening. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of which we're meeting tonight. We recognise their ongoing connection that the First Nations peoples have to their lands, and we thank them for their custodianship. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future. So, welcome, how exciting. Thank you all for coming out in the rain. What a night. We have all flown in from Melbourne, so stoked with the weather, thanks so much. But we are, of course, midway through March, which is B Corp month, very exciting. And so truly there is no better time for us all to get together tonight and have a chat about sustainability in fashion. So let's kick off by welcoming our beautiful panel here tonight. Firstly, we have our Baird founder and CEO, Anna Baird. I'm sure that most of you in this room already know about the brilliant Anna. But Anna has grown Baird Footwear from humble beginnings in 2008 to the $70 million business that it is today. Anna started her career as a podiatrist before recognising the massive gap in the market for shoes that look as good as they feel. And the rest, as they say, is history. Welcome, Anna. Little clap. Okay, joining Anna is the beautiful Lucianne Tonti, very dear friend of mine, journalist, author, and one of Australia's leading voices in sustainable fashion. Lucianne's first book, Sundressed, investigated the fast fashion crisis and explores a future remade by natural fibres. Lucianne is also the fashion editor at The Guardian and soon to release her second book, which is about witches. Welcome, Lucianne. Intriguing.
Thank you.
And finally, we're joined by the wonderful Jessie French, materials innovator and founder of Other Matter. Jessie has carved out a name for herself with her exploration of algae as a natural alternative to plastics. You will have seen Other Matter's work in the window of Aesop or Glasshouse or right here at Baird, where we have just today replaced our B Corp signage with an Other Matter algae applique, if we can call it that. Very exciting. Welcome, Jessie. Round of applause for our panel. So we don't really need an excuse to get clever women together on stage, but let's chat about why we are here tonight. We were recently recertified with a B Corp certification, and when we were thinking at Baird how we wanted to celebrate this, it really came back to doing it in a meaningful and intentional way, and for that felt like a conversation with a couple of friends in the room and 2 cameras. Perfect. So we're here to talk about sustainability in fashion, but more specifically, what does that actually mean in 2026? Sustainability in fashion has gone from being a niche concern to a marketing headline, and yet the industry remains one of the most resource intensive in the world. At Baird, we are straight shooters. You will come to see we're not about buzzwords, we're not about greenwashing. So tonight we're here to really unpack all of the crunchy realities of keeping sustainability at the core of our business and all of the uncomfortable tensions this has created between commerce, creativity and climate. That was a mouthful. Climate. So we're incredibly lucky to have 3 people that I think are approaching this from very different angles tonight, and I'm very excited about the conversation. Together, our panel brings together media scrutiny, brand leadership, and materials innovation into one conversation, which feels like exactly the kind of cross-industry thinking we need right now. So let's get started. Anna, obviously, we're going to start with you. The word sustainability in 2026 has really become so heavily used, overused maybe, that I think it has started to lose some meaning. So when we say sustainability in 2026, what are we actually talking about?
Oh, it's quite a big question, and I think it's, sustainability, I think, in some ways it's overused, in some ways it's underused. I think a few years ago there was a lot of talk about it, and then there was a whole lot of greenwashing. And it seemed like brands cared a bit. There was lots of capsule collections coming out of, everyone was trying to jump on this bandwagon. Then some people were getting caught out for it being greenwashing. And now it's all gone quiet, I think. And I think it would be better if there was more greenwashing going on because people would be doing something. It feels like no one really cares right now. But what does it mean? I think for fashion brands, it's probably into three things. One, it's the environmental sort of things that you're looking at, your emissions and your waste and what materials you're making your product out of, your carbon offsetting, recording all these sorts of things. So very much environmental, what energy you're using, water. And then there's the social side of things. Who's actually making your product? Are they paid a living wage? Can they survive on what, and do we know that? Who's actually, how far we're going back to people that are making the products that we make? And then the third one is really at end of life. What's going on, the longevity of actually the product that you're making, and then the circularity that comes with that, if any, or how do we extend the life of a product, or what happens at the end of life. So I think it is, for any brands talking about sustainability, it's actually every bit of that, and diving deep into every bit of that, which is a lot in any fashion brand. And footwear in particular, I think, is one of the hardest because shoes are made of so many different components. We want them to be really durable. Most shoes are made from petrochemicals. Most shoes are plastic. They may have bits of leather and they may have bits of rubber in them, but really most shoes that you're buying are predominantly plastic and petrochemical based. So, and then we want them to, plastics are cheap. The demand isn't there for better materials, and then we want these shoes to last a long time and then break down and do no harm and not leave microplastics in our earth. So it is a nightmare. And circularity in footwear, to deconstruct a shoe is incredibly hard. You've got lots of components all stuck together, and we're spending a fortune, with the most expensive outsoles in the world, gluing them together with shit. And at the end of life, our shoe is still going into landfill majority of the time. Yes, we do lots of recycling into mats and things. You can only have so many rubber mats in the world. So we're so far from it. We're spending millions of dollars on working with great innovators to make better products, but we are, it feels like we go one step forward, two steps back half the time.
Work in progress. Still stepping forward. Good answer. Lucianne, I'm going to give you a big juicy question to kick off, something nice and easy like Anna's. Based on, you've been at this for years now, but based on your years of research, where do you think the fashion industry is getting it most wrong?
Well, polyester. It's 43% of the industry's emissions come from virgin polyester, and we don't talk about it. We talk about everything, but we talk about end of life, which is a conversation that really kills me because the best way to reduce a garment's footprint is to wear it more and more and more. So when we're not talking about virgin polyester, which is not durable, despite what they say, we're really missing a beat. And then, there's so many other things. The other big piece for me is the positive kind of outcomes. So synthetic materials, you're never going to have a positive outcome on waterways, soil health, wildlife, biodiversity. But with natural fibres, when we farm them regeneratively, we can have all of these wonderful outcomes for forests, for soil, for resilient landscapes, for farmers. And really what we've got at the moment is a conversation that's all about mitigating harm. And what we should be talking about is, I'm assuming everybody in the room tonight cares about sustainability, is how, we've got the most persuasive argument, how do we save the planet? How do we save the world? And it's definitely not with virgin polyester. And so I think when we I think we've got to do better, all of us. We've got to tell better stories. We've got to remember that nature is the protagonist here. The earth is the protagonist here. And when we switch the way we think about our materials and start advocating for them properly, regenerative supply chains, sheep on the land, cotton that's grown in ways that can restore soil health and, bring back birds and bees and native wildlife. It's really... we're failing on those metrics at the moment, and we did talk earlier tonight about not being too doom and gloom, but we have this huge opportunity, and I think that's really where we've got to land.
I love that. Women being let's not be too doom and gloom about the environmental crisis. The planet is dying. All right. Oh, Jessie. Oh, gosh. All right. Girl. So globally, we're looking at, Lucianne's just touched on, this kind of huge, nebulous environmental challenge. And I think in materials innovation, you guys are kind of the solution finders in that. What are you seeing, do you think that your industry is enough to shift the dial, number one? And number two, what are you seeing that really feels genuinely disruptive at the moment?
Well, I think that these things aren't really new. Like, the innovation is really just kind of pulling back from the past, and I think someone asked me the other day what something sustainable is, and I think it's really, really important to really just agree on what we're talking about. And for me, I think something sustainable is something that can actually be sustained at scale. And, the questions you're talking about, they can't be done at the scale that we're doing it right now. We're creating so much stuff and it's unsustainable no matter what material it is. It's just not able to be done. And all of these issues are really interlinked. We also have rising populations. We've got climate change that's actually going to shrink the amount of land we have. The amount of natural resources we have is running out. But the thing that we need to actually just bring back and not innovate, but we're going to call it innovation because it's going to help the marketing. But it's really just about going back to thinking about how things work as a natural cycle, which is that they cycle around. We don't just make it and put it in landfill and then make brand new stuff. I'm a really I didn't come from a science background. I actually came from a history and philosophy of science background. So I like to kind of critique things and look at the history of them. And I was really interested to look at the history of planned obsolescence. So this actually started as an economic paper during the Great Depression from an economist that was thinking about how to revive the economy. And the idea was that they used a table and a furniture maker. And this was at a time when the furniture retailer was also the maker. They were the same thing, not like today. But they use this example where you have a table, you sell it to a customer, maybe it's $200, and you have a timeline on it. If they bring it back in the timeline, maybe it's 5 years, 8 years, they basically get 50% back. You get the table back. You remake the table maybe with a new stain to update it to the style, and then you sell it again. That's actually what planned obsolescence was meant to be. So it was actually meant to be upcycling. So I think all of these things are not new. We just need to kind of peel back. We've been in a little bit of overdrive, kind of manic situation for the last, it's only been 150 years. It's not too long in the history of human history, in the history of the planet, in the history of what has been here before. So I think, in not being too gloom and gloom, we also need to kind of give ourselves a break and be like, hasn't been that long. We've been in a linear economy for about 300 years since we left the agrarian system and started doing this. And we're moving quite quickly, if you think about that time scale, back into a circular economy. But, these things are not going to happen instantly, and it's going to be people who push the dial that's going to make it return to what it used to be.
I love listening to you talk. So interesting. Gosh, there's so much stuff about everything. I mean, a nice segue as well, I think, to my next question, which is back to you, Anna, and really talking about business and business growth and how you kind of navigate that alongside sustainability. I love that you're going to be very honest with me in your answer to this question. But can a fashion brand truly be sustainable and still grow? Or is growth inherently at odds with sustainability?
Well, I don't know that there's any truly sustainable fashion brands probably, that doesn't make any clothes right now. So I don't even know if they exist. But hopefully everyone's aiming to try and get there. But the question, can you be
sustainable and still grow?
And can you grow? You can 100% grow, but our customers don't buy our shoes for any of the initiatives that we do in this space. They buy the product because it's really cool and it's really comfortable and we look after people. So that's why I have a profitable business, and that it's profitable so I can invest in a better product and we can give back to communities and things that we care about. But you need a viable business and a fantastic product that stands up on its own. If you're starting a business purely because it's green, it's a very niche market that you're going after. As I said, I don't think our customers, I think some of them would feel better because they do look at some of this stuff and go, actually, I'm buying from a brand that actually cares about more than just making money. But they're not buying the shoe for any of this. They're buying it because it's cool and it's comfortable, and they know that they'll be looked after and they'll be in a comfortable shoe that they like. That's the business. So yes, you can do it, but you need to be profitable. You've got to have a commercial. I was saying today, if I I could speed up my desire to make a fully bio-based shoe that goes back to, by trying, like, I could make probably a grass espadrille with a hemp upper. And I could probably make that,
They
but
sound cool.
my corporate woman that wants to wear, you know, this boot
Has money to spend.
and they don't want that shoe. And maybe I could do a few, but I'm dead if that's what I decide to make my business. So you have to be profitable to actually be able to invest in this space.
And how did you find balancing that? I mean, obviously you started Baird, it was doing so well. These initiatives and sustainability came in. I mean, was that difficult to make decisions or sacrifices once the business was up and running?
Yeah, well, I started the business 18 years ago, and sustainability wasn't really on my radar. I mean, you know, in small ways and packaging sensible things that only idiots would do, you know, in a bad way. But it really wasn't on my radar, and probably till about 8 years ago, where I really 22 billion pairs of shoes are thrown out every year, and you started really going, we're part of one of the worst industries. What do we do about it? So it was literally searching the globe to try and find material innovators that are making better materials, and then finding ones that are legitimately better, not a little bit of pineapple. We don't have too many pineapples in the world. So it's like there was a lot of stuff that you could dial up a marketing thing, and we would look at it and then do some research and go, this is nylon backed. Like, this is not better than leather. Like, heaps and heaps of that, which has been our journey. And it is, you know, you need your whole team interested in this, down to the people on the, you know, the casuals that are telling each other off if they walk in with a coffee cup. Like, the whole business needs to care and shout it out, and that's how you actually progress a business. I think that was
No, it's a great
sidetracked.
answer. No, it's perfect. Alongside profitability, it sort of needs to be the precursor to change. Yeah, for sure. Luce, hello. Now, you've been researching this for years, which I keep saying. You're better connected to the buying behaviours of the modern shopper, and we often hear that consumers really need to make better choices. Do you think that we're placing too much weight on individual buying decisions? Like, do we need to cut the customers some slack here?
Yeah, I mean, we're not shopping our way out of this mess. Like, it's an unpopular thing to say. But also, I think we need to be very cognizant of the systemic forces that we're up against and who is in control. I don't want to sound too conspiracy theorist, but who is in control of making us think that we have the ability to change things. Like, it's hard to say this because Lottie's here, but recycling was invented by fossil fuel companies. Like, they knew, DuPont knew, we've got, like, you can go, I know somebody that's gone into the archives and read the papers. They knew in the 1970s that recycling was never going to work at scale. They knew, but they marketed plastic to the consumer as something that was recyclable because they wanted people to keep buying it. They had a PR problem. People were like, we can see that plastic is rubbish. We can see that it's causing issues. And we're still buying the PR narrative 50 years later. And now, like idiots, we think it's applicable to fashion, which is so much more complicated than plastic, which is a single material. A garment has so many different components in it, and less than 10% of all of the plastic that's ever been made has been recycled. Like,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, and we think that these super complicated garments that often we don't actually even know what's on them, what's in them, like, I don't want to get too in the weeds with recycling. I know people can do it on small scales. I've been to the biggest textile recycler in the world in Sweden, who then went bankrupt a couple of months later. Like, it's tough out there. You can do it physically, but the commerce of it right now doesn't work. And what makes me sick is that that's exactly what they figured out. They figured out that it was never going to work because it was always going to be cheaper to buy the virgin or produce the virgin thing. And so we're really, every time we push back to the consumer and say, change your light bulb, you know, do this, like, separate your garbage. Like, we're missing the big picture. And the big picture is vested interests who have a lot of money and they like to spend it to keep things as they are. There's a reason why we don't have more electric vehicles in Australia. Like, you don't have to go very far, and we've got to wake up because, like, I had a tough conversation with Livia Firth, I don't know if anybody here knows her. She had a consultancy in London called Eco Age. She doesn't have it anymore. Now she's running a regenerative farm in Italy with her brothers. And, you know, we know that fossil fuel companies disrupted the plastic treaty negotiations. We know that. And she and I were talking because every time I'm at a global fashion conference, there's some guy in a suit who I don't know who comes up to me and is like, polyester's not all that bad. And I'm like, who are you?
Who is that guy? That guy
Who's
sucks.
that guy? But that guy, he's a fossil fuel lobbyist.
Yeah.
And then when it happens, I'm going back to Copenhagen in May. When that happens next
Take
time, I'm
us
going
with
to be
you.
like,
We'll
"Have you
all
got a
go. We'll
card?"
talk to that man.
Yeah, show me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, no, it's not about consumers. Do what's right for you, because obviously we all have to take responsibility for ourselves, but it's not about consumers.
It's a psychological thing. I think fashion also is such an emotional purchase as well, like kind of pushing it back, very complex kind of decision making. Jessie, I mean, you've obviously worked with a number of really big brands with your business, Other Matter. What are some of the barriers you're experiencing in materials innovation when you're working with these brands and they're looking to the future and how they can kind of action change?
Look, I think, you know, when you're bringing something new, there's always, it costs more. That doesn't, you know, that's no shock to anyone. I think when you're working with petrochemicals, or against petrochemicals, or in competition with, or, you know, in price competition, you know, the fact is that petrochemicals are being subsidized to the tune of $7.1 trillion per year, according to the IMF. And, you know, there's a paper in Nature recently which kind of made the very good point that I think there was 128 billion invested in sustainable power sources. And the impact of that investment was like a lot more than obviously the impact in just subsidizing the fact that it's costing more to get the petroleum out of the ground now. But I think you have to kind of bring into that the conversation that, you know, there are the world's economy is really built on this right now. And that article was making this point that we should be spending that 7.1 or 7.3 trillion US dollars on actually just supporting these communities that are going to have to transition at some point, rather than just like propping up something that's going to cost more and exponentially more when there's a war involved. But I think, you know, the cost is a problem. You know, we have these pressures on price that we know are going to get more concentrated as, you know, the geopolitical situation degrades, as we have more climate change related emergencies to respond to, as life just gets more expensive, which we know is going to happen. So I think price is one thing, but this is why it's really important to kind of have these brands that do have that much more mature and sophisticated look at the way that they're doing business, and realizing that these conversations really matter because people are realizing that this is a bigger problem. But I think with petrochemicals, the issue is also, you know, back to the consumer making the choice. It's also about consumers just being more informed. So, you know, my practice started as an artistic practice, critiquing what's going on with materials. When you have an exhibition, there's wall text usually. That wall text is made of PVC. The type of PVC that is made into thin, flexible signage film is a particularly awful type. It's described by a conservative friend of mine as naughty PVC. But that's really understating the fact.
Gosh, that sounds like some naughty PVC.
That if anyone's read or heard of this class of chemicals called phthalates, they are robustly and very, very strongly linked to falling fertility in humans, also other animals as well. But PVC that's made it soft and flexible into signage film is 50% phthalate content. And we absorb that chemical through our skin and the air that we breathe. And, you know, I just couldn't have my work described in this medium. So I then developed an alternative, and that's kind of where we are now. And my company, Other Matter, is really involved in just being the material custodian of that and, you know, taking that to the world. And that is now the practice, because I think we're in these times and that's what we need to be doing. Critique is not enough right now. But, you know, I think, you know, just like the individual is not the person to blame, just like the brand is not the person to blame, but there are also, you know, people and organizations that have agency, and I think that is really earning respect. And in this age of AI and, the trends that we're seeing with people are just kind of sick of this, that authenticity and kind of walking the talk is, I think, what future-looking brands are doing. And they're also making themselves ready for coming regulation, which we were chatting about earlier. But yeah.
Interesting. Anna, I just want to thread that out a little more. So Anna was talking before about sort of reaching a requisite profitability before exploring sustainable options. Do you find that a lot with brands that come to Other Matter, that they've sort of reached this point where they have the resources to start investing? Or are you finding most of the people working with you, it's in their infancy or their startup phases?
It's all different. It's really all different. There's other ways that we're kind of working with. I mean, the signage obviously costs more than regular signage, but it has some differences in that we don't need an adhesive to stick to glass, and so we can actually be reusable. So when you're paying for PVC signage, the PVC costs almost nothing. What the cost is labour, because it's cut out, and then it's called weeding. It's basically you take a sheet, you cut out letters, and you have to take out all of the space that you don't want as part of your letters that go on the wall. And then the install costs. But if you can make something that is a modular set of parts that changes or is reinstalled 3 or 4 times, then the cost comes down to parity. So we're starting to have those conversations, and I think now we're at a point where it's really meeting the scale, where we're kind of reaching capacity of where we're at now, and then working on those next steps of production, upscaling, and moving to next scale.
Exciting. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about having modular parts. That's where you see the behaviours start to change of a brand and going, how can we do this differently? Yeah. Well, materials, let's talk about Pliant. We're nearing the end of our panel already, and I really want to get stuck into talking about Pliant. For the audience, what is it and why did you invest in it?
Well, Pliant is just one of the components that we use in our shoes, but it's a sort of an interesting story, more of how hard this space is, and I think Pliant it's a 100% bio-based natural rubber outsole. Most rubber in outsoles uses a curative that's full of toxins, and so they're really bad for the environment, even if they do use a certified stewardship, FSC, I can't speak too many letters, certified rubber, it's still, the curative is really, really nasty. So Pliant is the greenest, it's the best outsole in the world, but it's created by an American business called Natural Fibre Welding, and some of you would have, if you follow this space, would have seen it in the media. They had $250 million invested in that business. It started in 2015, so this is a short period of time, a lot of money. And a lot of it, and Pliant is one of their materials. They sort of had 3 materials. One was a leather alternative, which is really where all the money went in. BMW was who they were trying to develop this product for. And along the way, Pliant sort of came out of it, which is an outsole material. But they went under last year. They've just survived. But really, it is just a story of one, I mean, it's kind of an interesting story that we were talking to, is there's been lots of money into leather alternatives. Most leather alternatives are obviously plastic at the moment, so it's great that they're trying to find things that aren't plastic, but leather itself is a byproduct of the meat industry. Meat isn't going anywhere, it might be reducing, but there's a lot of hides that need to be used. It is the best material. It's really hard to replicate. Lots of brands are trying and spending money, but really I don't know that they need to be honest, is what I keep going, tanning process is better and cleaner. That's where the money should be going. But yeah, Pliant for us, the sad thing is we really ended up the biggest client left for this out of this business, and we've sort of helped them survive, and but we've had it in our outsoles for 3 years. Every sandal and most of our shoes is Pliant. We have no problems. It's commercial product. It's fantastic. Yes, it's more experienced, but with scale, which they are getting to, it will be. And it hasn't. I mean, it's probably cost us about $1.5 million more than using a commercial product that's out on the market. But it has moved, and now other companies have got similar products coming out, which we need. We can't rely on one business to produce. We were going back to petroleum a few months ago after investing all of this time and effort in this outsole. But yeah.
So let's talk a little more about the move to Pliant for Baird. What were some of the challenges that came up when you guys made that decision to go with a better product?
well, it was just, we've had lots of challenges with new, I mean, the problem with being an innovative, working with new materials is that you have problems. So we risk our brand, you know, you can buy a shoe and you get an inferior product that I've sold you because we're trying to do the right thing. And this is, well, I mean, one of the stories, which is actually not Pliant, I'll come to Pliant, the problem that we did have with Pliant with one particular type of shoe. But when all of our footbeds, as some of you know, all have a footbed in them. That I was a podiatrist, I started 18 years ago, and all of the shoes, the key feature is that actually it's got this biomechanical footbed that makes them really supportive and comfortable. That for years was made out of polyurethane, 100% petroleum. And then I get dates mucked up now. I'm getting old and the years keep flying. But
I've got them here. What would you like?
We changed to a 73% bio-based product, so much better than what we were using. The actual mechanical properties are fantastic. But when we launched that product, luckily it was in removable shoes, but we used a cork top cover, which again we thought we were doing a better thing by the environment. That top cover
So many tongue twisters tonight, it's tricky.
peeled off within about 3 days of wear. So you've spent a fortune on a shoe that now you take it, you literally, this cork is peeling off on your foot, in your hand, wherever it was. So luckily we are a great partner for these innovative businesses, because we could contact every customer that had bought those shoes and get them another footbed with a different top cover. And so we bring our customers on the journey. We're willing to take that risk because we have to do these things to move the dial. Pliant point toes, we don't have it in our point toes because it was chipping on the toe of a point toe shoe, which again is the worst thing we can do for the environment, because we've got a perfectly good shoe that is chipping at the toe. What are we going to do with that? You know, we can repair it and we were repairing it, but it's just not good enough. So we had to pull it off that product. We're now, thankfully, have got some other alternatives that we're about to launch for those shoes. But yeah, it's not a straight road, but Pliant in other shoes has been absolutely perfect, and it should be in so many more shoes around the world.
Yeah, it's a difficult journey to do the right thing. Luce, maybe I'll throw to you quickly. You've spoken with a lot of brands and obviously about the sustainable shifts that they've made. What are the challenges you see coming up for fashion brands making the right decision that's hard necessarily for their business?
I think with the alternative material space, it's understanding that fashion supply chains are years old. Yeah. So when you're coming in with spider silk or a cactus leather or whatever it is, that's not something that's easy for a factory or a manufacturer to adopt, because they're used to how leather performs, or they're used to how silk performs, or that just puts in another barrier to scale. And the thing, most of the time when I spend time talking to farmers and I spend time talking to designers, and they actually have a really tough time meeting. And so farmers are always like, how do we get our story out there? And it's like, well, it's through the brand. And the brand is like, how do we tell the story of our materials? And it's like, well, it's through the farmer. But like, so much happens in the middle that like the traceability and going all the way back to the landscape is not easy to do. And that's something that, you know, would be easier if we had more transparent supply chains and shorter supply chains and more local manufacturing and more local, you know, processing of, say, cotton and wool, for example, that we produce a lot of in Australia. So I think that there's so much intention within certain brands that they want to do the right thing. And then, you know, obviously there's a large cohort of the fashion industry that is invested in profit, and they're invested in scale and overproduction, which we haven't really touched on, but that's the other big piece of the puzzle here, where we are using systems that are hundreds of years old, and it is a system that is based on the idea you order, and then, you know, 6 months, 3 months later, you get your product. And what we really need is, so over the last decade, $3 billion was invested in next generation materials. And what we really need is actually some of that investment to go into decarbonising the supply chain, investing in new technologies. Like, you know, there's amazing technologies coming out of, let's say, Unspun in San Francisco, where you can 3D weave jeans, and that like dramatically shortens the supply chain, because you're going from yarn to garment, and you can do it in 10 minutes. You can make a pair of jeans to like tailor to your size and whatever cut you want within 10 minutes. And if you kind of expand that out and you're a regenerative cotton farmer who then buys a gin and a spinning mill and processes their cotton into yarn, if you then also invested in the unspun technology, then you would also be able to go directly to product very, very quickly, which is not something. We've got a failure of imagination in the powers that be, especially in the fashion industry in Australia, where they're not really seeing the big picture of where the investment should go and what would be very interesting for us as a country with like a lot of money but expensive labour, for example. If you're doing unspun, we're talking about engineering jobs. We're not talking about garment manufacturing jobs. Like we're really kind of projecting forward into the future. There's I've gone way off track.
No, I'm also taking notes as you're speaking. It is really interesting.
Soapbox, yeah.
No, it's perfect. So I was just going to bring you in, Jessie, and say, with Other Matter, you are the example of this, of quite a small closed loop supply chain where you are producing and selling the thing all in the same business. What are the challenges in that? I mean, you can't hide behind a really big supply chain where you're not connecting farmer to designer. Has that brought up challenges for you guys in its own sense?
I mean, there's challenges in everything. I mean, you've got challenges in running a business. There's challenges in, it's a difficult space. Doing things differently is always going to have a challenge because you're trying to change the way that things usually work. I think we've made some really big decisions. When you first contacted me and we were talking about Pliant, I was really I'd seen the news and it wasn't just the only one. There was like 7 huge new material manufacturers, which, I think with all of those, the pattern was that they took on big investment. They're not doing something that's kind of decentralized. It's high labor, it's manufacturing, it's high fixed costs. And then, the investment model, I think the startup model is also quite a tricky model because you're kind of betting on this future forecast, and if you don't make it, you kind of can lose it all. So I think this is also something to think about. This is a huge challenge, but it's also just the way that you manage how to do it. And at the moment, we've decided to go quite slow and build on work that we already have. And it's a much slower way to do it, but we've been able to do things like we do have a completely closed loop now. We can take signage back, we recook it, we make a leather product that is not suitable for shoes, but we make furniture. We're starting to make furniture with it. And we're starting to outreach to other designers to make other things with it. So the whole system has been designed so that the outcome of the recycling is then an upsell. It's a more expensive product that then justifies the labor and the reprocessing. And I think this is where we've gone wrong. The history of the plastic recycling is, if you want to look that up, the book it's called Consumed, How Big Brands Got Us Hooked on Plastic. And it really goes into it in a way that tells you the story of how we've ended up with that. But I think all of these things are challenging. Change is always hard. But, life is quite hard right now. So I think, you just got to keep thinking about what hard you want and where you want to change.
I like that, what hard you want. So true. And I mean, there's been a lot of hard in your journey with Baird. What do you think is the biggest thing you've learnt in this last sort of 10 years or so of moving into sustainability and kind of being a pioneer in that space? What have you learned?
I've learned how to waste
What is the
money.
biggest thing you've learned?
How to test. I learned the hard way in so many things. I don't know. Things are so much slower and harder than you think. I think I was very optimistic, probably.
No doom and gloom. Come on, we're giving people something good.
No, but I think it's coming. I think it will come. It's just been slower. I think the legislation that's coming is actually going to force everyone's hand, which actually will move the dial. Brands will have to get on board. So I think that's... and they'll have to be transparent. So I think that at the moment there's no accountability. So I think that's coming. It's coming fast. So I think it will move quite quickly.
So get started now. Yeah, okay. Not doom and gloom. I think that's quite constructive. So this actually brings us to the end of the panel. I have one question that I want to give all of you, and that is, if we fast forward a decade from now, what do you think is going to be the thing that separates the brands that survive in the fashion industry from those that don't? Maybe Jessie, we'll start with you.
Look, I think there's always a scale of like great and not so great brands, and I think we're not going to get away from that. But I think what's going to be harder is exactly that, you know, the kind of the accountability, the transparency, and the brands that, you know, will keep the market share that they want are the ones that are able to kind of really do the things and be mature about it. And the legislation that we're talking about, or that we were referring to earlier, was EU regulation that's coming in. So it's coming in over the next kind of 2 years for textiles. It comes in then there's other stuff that happens for furniture and interior materials. And then there's packaging that comes in 2030. So, you know, in that time period, we would have had that cycle through the EU region, and then hopefully just by force, global companies will then have to just do it as standard because they are operating in the EU, and then it'll force the change.
Hope on the horizon. Luce, what do you think?
Well, I think that really, if you're a designer, you've got to be working really hard to get back to the landscape where your materials are grown and protecting that land. Because if we hit 3 degrees of warming, there's going to be places where we'll probably still have cotton, but it will be very difficult for us to have cashmere, wool, silk. And that really means that, you know, if you're investing in those natural materials that are really important for clothes that we really want to wear, you need to really be working all the way back through your supply chain to the source of the raw material and working with that farmer and, you know, making sure that you're giving them the resources and the tools and the storytelling that they need to be able to keep doing really good work on their landscapes. I think the brands that do that find it so rewarding. It's one of my favorite things to do, to go out onto a regenerative farm and to talk to a farmer who's, you know, actively seeing, native birds come back, seeing bees come back. Like, regenerative farms are a really joyful place. Conventional farms are not. And, I think that education piece is going to be more important, you know, as we go forward.
Positive storytelling.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Nature positive.
Nature positive. Anna, what do you think? What will keep brands surviving in 10 years' time?
I think authenticity is always the thing that people are really after. That if they can trust a brand, is why that will survive. And if they're actually worth trusting. Yeah. So I think just honesty. I mean, we talk about transparency, but I think it is just being authentic. If you actually know that you believe what the brand is telling you.
Yeah, true. They trust us here tonight, for sure. All right, guys. Well, can we please give our panel a round of applause? Fabulous, clever ladies. And I would love to open up for some questions from the group. Who would like to start? Oh, straight away. Fabulous. I'm going to pass the microphone. I'm going to steal one of yours. You guys can share those too. Yeah, back on my stool.
Look, great panel. Thank you for your authenticity. I think all of us here are consumers of your brand. And I think in a world of information overwhelm and misinformation, I guess what is Baird doing in terms of making sure we have a clear path to hear that you are trying your best and you have an authentic story when it comes to climate or sustainability?
I think it's really hard. You know, we talk, like, again, we've got to advertise the fact that the shoes are really cool. That's what, like, we're just a fashion brand. That's what people are seeing it, and you've got them on cool people going, these are cool, comfortable shoes. So then to cut through to then get to anything else apart from the fact they're comfortable and cool, it's sort of way down the chain. We've got to talk about, because we're spending the money, so we may as well be talking about it. And there is a customer out there that does care. But also it is, you know, everything, and all the team are always, like, I'm so critical of everything we're saying, because, like, don't say it without saying why it's not good enough, because nothing's, like, we're so far from being anywhere near good enough. So I hate it when we're making these claims. It's like we're doing this, but trying to always say, but that's not where we're going, you know, we're nowhere near doing enough. Because it is, otherwise it is basically, well, not greenwashing because we're doing stuff, but it's still a shoe made out of shit. Like there's lots of stuff in our shoe. You know, it's not.
Straight shooters, I
but
told you
what I
guys,
mean?
straight shooters.
Like it's not perfect. There's
No.
components that are really expensive and every component really is better than every other brand, I think, about the way we do it. But it's still going to end up in landfill. Realistically. I don't know if that answers your question. It's actually really hard to talk, you know, because the fashion customer, we're a fashion brand making comfortable shoes. That's the bit that is on an ad. Yeah.
That's the tension, right? That's the tension between creativity and commerce and
And I
whatever
think
last thing was.
doesn't matter that we don't, I mean, we do have to talk about it because it's important, but it isn't, to me, it doesn't really matter that the customer doesn't care. We care, and I think they will care, but at the moment, I don't care that they don't care, really, as long as we're selling shoes. Does that make sense?
Show of hands, who cares in this room, please? Great question. All right, who's next? We might pass the microphone back. Is that okay? Thank you. Thanks, Mills.
Hi, I was just going to ask, considering the cost of living in all your faces just with you now, as someone who wants to be fashion forward to some extent, how do you think is the best way for someone who can't really afford straight off the bat maybe an archival piece, how to be sustainable in, you know, your day-to-day life fashion wise, besides, for example, thrifting? Yeah.
Tonti, I reckon that's for you.
I mean, thrifting is the answer. The most sustainable thing you can buy is definitely something secondhand. But then it's also just the little things that you do to your wardrobe to make sure that it lasts for a really long time. And when you do invest in something, looking for those markers of durability, almost above sustainability. So, you know, making sure that like a coat has lining, for example, and like all of the seams are French seams and the pockets are really sturdy, that it doesn't have any synthetic blends because they hold on to stains and smells. And even though people like to say it's durable, it's not. And so, so just all those markers. But then, you know, if you spill something on a white shirt, you get the stain out straight away, like all of those little things. I feel like it's a bit of a disappointing answer in a way, but honestly, we used to really invest in our clothes. Like I think it's like in 1912, the average household was spending 20% of their budget on their clothes, and now that has shrunk to like minuscule amounts, like single digits, and that's because clothing has gotten a lot cheaper, but that also puts the consumer at a disadvantage because you're just getting ripped off, basically. So, so it's really learn the hallmarkers of durability, especially with fabric, and that's kind of like your through line.
Great.
Just to help you answer that question from earlier, Anna, one of the ways that I think brands can promote is to keep doing what they believe in. And so my question is like, what motivates each of you each day? But like Baird is being recognised by institutions outside of what they're doing because Anna's drive is there. And so for each of you, what motivates you each day?
Jessie. The ones that don't make eye contact, I pick them first.
Oh,
yeah.
Look, I mean, I never expected to be making signage. Not what I started out doing. But look, I think, you only need to look around you. You need to kind of open the news and then you're kind of like, holy crap, we got to do something. So I think it's that, but I think, it's also like up until mid-2024, my practice was just me. So all of the work to get to the patent was kind of just one person. And in that year, CSIRO gave us the award for the most promising innovation in ending plastic waste against like huge CRC research labs that had like 40 people and had like hundreds of millions of dollars of funding. So, I think there's also, you can do something, it's not impossible. Some of these things are not rocket science. It's actually not that hard. You just need to kind of keep going and really like, you've just got to get up in the morning.
I love that.
This wouldn't have been my answer before I started researching for my next book, but now it's very much like, these assholes have been running the world in this one way for a really long time, and we are so close to flicking the switch back to being more connected to nature, more connected to each other. Like we are so close to the cliff, and I think that we have to really. They are so good at being bad guys. They are smart and they are ruthless, and we're constantly just over here being like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that they would do that. And it's like, no, of course they derailed the plastics treaty. Like, they care about money and nothing else. And they care about keeping women in the home and scapegoating whoever they need to violently so that they can get through their agendas. And we've got to wake up. And we've got to, I mean, I don't mean to be like, fight back, but we do. It's the time, really.
Who wants to read Lucianne's next book?
I want to read the Witches one.
Yeah, that's the next one. It's the Witches book. Yeah, there's more.
What motivates me? I mean, we get to work with really exciting innovators and people that are trying to change, and create new things. And then, I've got the best team of really passionate people in the business. Makes one on. So that, everyone is sort of after the same thing. So I think that, it's easy when you've got a team of people helping you and driving it every day as well.
Yeah, for sure. Great question, though. Any other questions? Everyone wants to get back to the catering, I think. Oh, guys, fabulous audience tonight. Thank you all for coming out in the rain. Let's give another round of applause to our panel. Thank you, ladies.